most financial advisors do not have a leads problem, they have a goodwill problem. Okay, and in this video, I'm going to explain exactly what that means and how it's going to exactly change the way you view prospecting and how you can eventually get way more appointments and never run out of it. Okay, so if you don't know me, my name is Ben. I'm a founder of Authentic Advice Systems, where we help financial advisors grow with proven systems so they never have to guess what to do next. Okay, and in this video, I'm going to share with you a concept that will help you do that and get more appointments. At the end of the day, right, like if you look at the financial advisory business as a whole, it's a people business, right? Where you have to, there's the business side of things, which is the transactions, the products, the concepts, and the business side of like planning. And there's also the people, right? Because at the end of the day, you know, especially when it comes to insurance, wealth accumulation, investment linked plans, all of these things are a commodity, right? It's just something that, you know, people could just compare side by side and try to make a ton of comparisons, right? And so the biggest differentiator have everything to do with basically the prospect and yourself, right? And basically you are the biggest reason why people will buy from you. I'm going to share with you basically how to never run out of appointments, or why also the biggest reason why people keep saying they have a leads problem, right, is this. I guess it's like every 10 advisors I speak to, they'll probably like 7 of them will always say that their warm market has run out, right? Or they are speaking to the same group of people, they're following up the same group of people, but somehow they never seem to be able to convert, they can't get them to meet up, they can't get them to buy from you, basically default back into like a leads problem where they need to buy more leads, okay? But that's not actually or exactly the case, right? More often than not, especially if you start out, of course this is like generalization, it's not for everybody, but most people would have at least a decent amount of warm market. Some people have actually a lot of warm market, but they still keep saying they run out, right? And it's because of this concept I'm going to share with you. So I just want to imagine this, that every time you deal with prospect, right? And so imagine this is like your prospect, okay? This is your prospect or your client, right? Whichever, okay? And so imagine every time you look at a prospect, just need to understand that there will be 2 accounts that you have with them, right? This is what I call the social equity pipeline, which is there will be 2 accounts. Now, the first account is what I call the goodwill account, okay? Goodwill. And then the second is what I call the money account, okay? And so I think goodwill at the end of the day is really about like how much time, attention, and value have you provided to this prospect? How have you helped this prospect get to his or her goals or solve his or her problems faster, right? And so a lot of times, like, this is basically how much time, okay, how much energy, basically attention, okay, and how much value you provided, right? And usually value is provided when you solve a problem that makes it easier for their lives, make it more certain in their lives, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is what goodwill is. And then like money, obviously it's basically every person have like money, right? Like they have this like wallet over here, this bank account, they have money. So first of all is that every time you see a prospect or anyone that you're talking to or dealing with, is that there's this person and then they have a goodwill account with you and they have a money account with you. Okay, just need to understand this first. Okay, so now let me explain what this means and how does it relate to us in getting more appointments, or in fact never running out of appointments, right? Which is this. The reason why we have the goodwill and money account is very simple. If you want the money from them, right? Let's say you want them to buy something from you. You want them to meet you for appointments. You want them to buy ILP or insurance, so on and so forth, right? You want some of their money, okay? So let's say imagine this is like, you want a portion of their money, okay? Let me just highlight this. You want a portion of their money. If you want a portion of their money, the thing here is this is how human works, right? Is that there's never something from nothing. If they want to give you their money, other than the very fact that yes, they're buying the product, they also want to see how much goodwill you have with them. And so for example, if let's say you are an advisor, okay, and you call this prospect of yours, this friend of yours whom you have not met for the last 10 years, okay, so you do like a project 100 kind of thing. So you call the person and say, hello, hi, can I meet you to help you solve some of your problems and so that you can give me your money? Imagine that you have not spoken to him for the last 10 years. Imagine that you and him, before you become a financial advisor, you're not the closest with him also, right? Maybe it's just a hi-bye friend in junior college or even university, right? So imagine the kind of scenario. And then you call the person and say that, hey, can I have a bit of your money? What do you think the answer most likely this person will give? Probably a no, right? Probably give you a bunch of objections saying that they already got a financial advisor, you know, they're not interested, yada yada, the whole usual objections, right? And the reason for that is because if you look at the goodwill account you have, see, you haven't spoken to this person for the last 10 years, and there's not much relationship. You have not helped this person as much in the past before, or even now, right? The amount of goodwill you have here, right, is probably like little bit, right? You probably have a small amount of goodwill that you have this person, right? And so what happens here is that even though, yes, there is like physical money from this person, right? This person got money, but the reason why this person might not want to work with you or might not even want to meet you for appointments to begin with is because When you ask for appointment, when you ask for everything, right? In this case, right, the goodwill is too little. Right, the goodwill is too little. They don't see a reason. They don't see a big enough reason of like, why should I meet you, right? Why should I help you? Why should I meet you? Why should I even entertain, right, the possibility of, you know, having a financial planning session with you, right? And that's essentially like the whole idea. Okay, the more goodwill you have with someone, the more amount of quote unquote bad capacity of money this person will give to you. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the amount of money that you can have someone given to you, or their willingness to spend or to meet you or to buy with you, is directly proportional to the amount of goodwill you have with them. This is the reason why once you understand that these two bank accounts, then the way to go about with prospecting now, or the way that you want to see the business, right, is that every time you see a prospect, you just need to understand you got to deposit. There's only two things you can do. Either number one, you deposit goodwill, or number two, you withdraw money. And essentially what this means here is that you're converting, just imagine like you're converting your goodwill that you have with this person in exchange for money. That's essentially what you're really doing. Let me explain a little bit of goodwill, or give a little bit different angle of how to think about this, right? Which is this. Just imagine goodwill is actually money. It's just that goodwill, right, is a different form of currency. So imagine you're in Singapore right now. You're using SGD, okay? Right, this is how you transact in Singapore, for example. You're using Singapore dollars. And what happens here is that you may imagine that this person that you are transacting with basically deals with, for example, Japanese yen. Okay? Let's just say Japanese yen. When you deposit goodwill, and this person have goodwill with you, right? What it means here is that this person actually got Japanese yen. Right? The problem here is that you can't use the Japanese yen because you only transact in the SGD. Right? It's the same thing. You have goodwill with this person, you have helped this person so much, but you can't exactly use goodwill. Right? Like if you think about it, it's like you can have a lot of best friends, you can spend a lot of time with them, so on and so forth, but you can't exactly use that relationship to just convert into money, so to speak, right? You can't use goodwill, right? So what happens here is that we need to convert goodwill into Singapore dollars, right? But the whole point here is that you just want to think of like goodwill is actually money, it's just in a different form of currency, right? So instead of Japanese yen, instead of USD, it's called goodwill. Okay, just understand this. When you see it this way, then what this really means here is that goodwill is actually money. You can exchange for Singapore dollars. The problem here is that if your level of goodwill is low, the amount of money that you can exchange obviously will also be low. Every day, with every person over here in your contact list, with your clients, your prospects, people whom you have tried to close but didn't manage to close, what we want to do is to make sure that we always find ways to deposit goodwill every day, right? We want to always refill this container over here, right? Because if you don't, then you have a problem with withdrawal, right? You have a problem because you didn't even refill and deposit back into the goodwill bank account to begin with, okay? And so this is the reason why I say that there are people, and this might be you, is that you might have maybe at this point in time, right? You're warm, you're cold, your clients, right? Maybe you have like 1,000 people in your contacts, right? That could be a client, could be a co-prospect, could be a warm prospect, right? You have 1,000 leads. Okay, but the problem here is that you can't seem to convert, or they are not willing to meet you to begin with, or they kind of like avoid you, blue tick you, that kind of stuff. And the reason for a lot of times, right, it's not because you don't have leads. It's because the goodwill bank account is too low. Like every one of them that you have over here, right, their bank account is all like the goodwill you have in there is all low. Because what happens is that you already extracted a lot of the money. And this is the reason why, and I'll give you an example for this, right? So have you ever, let's say when you first start the industry, let's say you do a project 100. When you first join, you kind of reach out to maybe 100 of your warm prospects, right? People who are kind of like maybe semi-warm, people who kind of be your best friends, so on and so forth. Right? Out of these 100, okay, you probably close, let's say 10 people. Now, if you look at these 10 people, more often than not, these 10 people who are willing to meet you, sit down to hear you talk, and eventually buy from you, are usually people whom you have a better relationship with. People whom you have probably spoken to quite a fair bit, keep in contact, probably were there for them, had dinners, lunch, so on and so forth. Usually it's those people, right? And those people are actually quite supportive, right? Some of them are pretty okay to buy from you. Some of them are like, hey, like sure, like this meetup, I don't mind. Like you can definitely review my policies, so on and so forth. Okay, and so the reason for that is because before you became an advisor, you have spent a lot of time building goodwill with them, right? They're just basically your friends, you catch up with them, right? So what do? You spend time, you give energy, okay, and then you solve their problems, right? Maybe they just broke up, and then you spend time trying to, console them, trying to have a, listen to them, be a listening ear, that kind of stuff, right? And so you're basically providing time, energy, and problem, which basically increases goodwill. So when the time comes that when you become a financial advisor, and the time comes where you're trying to extract, these are the people that you have an easier time with to extract the money because you have amount of goodwill, quite a bit of goodwill with them, and they also have some form of money, and then they are willing to buy from you. Okay? And if you think about people whom probably find it harder, it's usually because like the amount of goodwill is just disproportionately low. You want to every person have 2 bank accounts, you want to deposit money so that you can withdraw the money later on, right? Because goodwill is just money, it's just another form of currency, okay? So you just want to exchange that. Now the second example that I'll cite, and this is if you're a financial advisor and you're probably like 3-5 years of business, you have 100 to 200 clients, okay? So you probably heard it within your agency where people say like, the more seasoned ones, they will tell you that, hey, I go back to my existing clients, I try to sell them, I try to ask them for referrals, I try to get testimonials from them. And then, as the years goes by, they keep doing the same thing. And then they will say things like, wow, I already squeezed dry my clients already, right? 我已经挤干了, right? So to speak, already squeeze it all dry already, right? And what happens is that the clients don't really want to meet them, they can't buy anymore, they don't really want to refer, so on and so forth, right? And the reason for that is because a lot of these advisors, once they have a clientele base, they think that just because they have a clientele base, they can keep getting money and keep going back to cross-sell, upsell. Wrong. What happens here is that when you have all these existing clients, and if you only do withdrawal, meaning say, every year you only go back to do cross-sell, upsell, you do financial planning, right? Which is, sure, valuable, but it's not a lot of goodwill, but you just try to extract money and try to get them to buy something. What happens here is that you're just withdrawing all these things, and eventually your clients don't really want to meet you. And sometimes it's not that your clients don't have anyone to refer. It's not that they don't have money to buy anymore. It's just that your goodwill with them, even though they are a client, is that it has already been like dried up. Okay? And this is the reason why, as part of your existing client servicing, you don't only want to go back to existing clients to just sell or just do wills, LPA, planning. You don't only want to do that. That is definitely one thing you want to do. But the second thing you always want to do and you want to integrate within your sales process or your servicing process is depositing goodwill, right? And you want to catch up with them, you want to kind of care about them, right? And by the way, giving gifts to them isn't that big of a deal. Honestly, when you buy a gift for someone, like you just like Chinese New Year gifts, so on and so forth, right? Like sure, it helps with some people, but you realize the amount of time, energy, and that you've given to someone just buying them a gift or solving their problem or giving value to them, right? It's actually not a lot, right? It's actually not a lot. Because guess what? Like you buy a Chinese New Year ang pao or bakwan for some people, like oranges or whatever, you just like mess send, right? Like it doesn't take you too much effort. Okay, but you can deposit a lot more goodwill if you spend 45 minutes with them in person, having a coffee. And so that's basically the whole idea of like goodwill, money, right? And basically you want to deposit. And so if you look at your current prospects right now, there might be people who are old prospects, so people who have not tried to close but didn't close, and people whom you have not met for the last 5-10 years. Before you extract any money from them, before you go for the ask, you want to make sure that you deposit goodwill. But the thing here is that if you don't do that, then you end up having to struggle with people. You end up trying to struggle to get people to meet you, get people to buy. How to deposit like goodwill, right? Like some of the ways to deposit goodwill. The first one will be just be like socializing with them, so catch up with them, engaging on their IG stories or on their Facebook or LinkedIn, whichever platform you're on. You want to spend more time having conversations with them to actually give them attention. The biggest reason, or one of the most important reasons why people go on social media, like your prospects go on social media and post things, is because they want this thing called attention, right? They want attention. Don't believe me? Think about it. Do you have a friend, okay, or prospect where he or she got 0 followers, but then he or she is posting every day? Probably not. Right? You know, because like no one is actually seeing them. And so when you actually care about their stories that they post, you engage with them, you comment, you ask them a question, you compliment them, right? What happens is they're giving you time, you're giving you energy, and in some sense, right, you're actually solving a problem that they have. Because their problem is that I don't have attention, right? No one is paying attention to me. Okay, I hope to post this content so that people give me attention. And what happens here is that you're giving them attention. Okay, and so in some sense, you are depositing goodwill over here. Okay, so catch up with them, have a conversation with them on IG, right, so on and so forth. Another one is sometimes like you could be like posting content, right? Posting content will help them, inspire them, entertain them, right? Usually it's one of these three things, right? It's educate, entertain, right, or inspire. Okay, so it's either one of these three things that you do on the content. And fun fact. So if you have seen some of like the influencer space on social media, right? What happens here is that they actually post a lot of content. Okay, what happens here is like Mr. Beast, right? Mr. Beast has been posting a ton of videos on YouTube. I don't know how many videos, but posting a ton of content on YouTube. And that has been the case for the last maybe like 10 years, for example. The very fact that he posted content and he doesn't charge people for content, right? Like he just posts the content. What happens here is that he amassed followers or subscribers. And so on YouTube, at this time of recording, I guess he's probably at like 400 million plus subscribers. Okay, so he gave away content for free. So he actually increased goodwill with the audiences. That's why people follow him. Okay, and then what happens is that the way he monetizes it, if you have 400 million subscribers and you have 100 million views per video, it's not gonna be beneficial for you. Meaning, say like you actually can't use, like you can't use the followers. Like you having views and likes on your YouTube video isn't gonna pay the bill. So what's gonna happen is that you have to monetize the goodwill and exchange it for money. And the way to do that, which is what Mr. Beast did, is that he basically takes his content, his followers, and then he opened up Feastables, right? Which is basically his chocolate company. So he actually opened his chocolate company, and I think his chocolate company is probably doing like 9 figures in revenue a year. Okay, and so that's basically what happens. And so if you realize, if you go and watch his YouTube video, there's a lot of advertisements in between, right? That he tried to sneak in and then, get people to buy and advertise Feastables, right? And that's basically how he earns money. The reason why his business can be so big is because he deposits a lot of goodwill, right? By doing content for like more than a decade for free, right? And then amassing the number of followers. Okay, and so this is basically what I call social equity pipeline. Okay, everybody always talk about, is the person going to buy from me, so on and so forth. We look at it a little bit differently, which is how much equity, how much goodwill you have socially with the people around you. Because the more you deposit, the more you plant, the more you take time to nurture them, the more you do that every single day, the more chances you have to extract money, or at least, in this case, exchange the goodwill for a bit of the money, right? And when I say money, it's a bit of a loose term, right? So money could be in the form of appointments. It could be later on, it could be a form of, planning, right? And then buying your products, ILP, so on and so forth. Okay, and so that's basically like what it means over here. And so if you find yourself at this point in time feeling dry, so to speak, feeling like, you're not getting enough appointments, you feel like your existing clients are dried up, so on and so forth, remember what this most likely will mean is that you haven't really been depositing enough goodwill. Okay? You haven't been depositing enough goodwill, and that's why you can't exchange the goodwill for money, because you don't have goodwill with them to begin with. Okay? And so from today onwards, if there's only one key thing you can take away from this video, is that every name contact in your phone right now, every person that you're going to meet, right, just remember there's a goodwill account and there's a money account. Before you ask them for money or ask them for appointments, so on and so forth, you always want to ask yourself how much goodwill you have with them. Because if the goodwill isn't a lot, you might want to hold off the asking first. You might just want to deposit goodwill by giving them time, energy, solving their problems for free. Just like how Mr. Beast did it, right? And a lot of the influencers in the content creation game, right? Which is give a bunch of content, do a lot of things for free, exchange some of the goodwill for money. I hope this will be helpful for you. If this is helpful, of course, please, share with your colleagues and so forth. But I think this would really change the way you see things and the way that you view business, right? And so every day you just wake up thinking of how you can deposit, because the more you deposit, the more you can withdraw. Okay? Hopefully this video is useful for you, and I'll see you in the next one.